The frozen body lay crumpled in the snow like a discarded rag doll. And Cole Ramsey knew that if he didn't act fast, whoever it was wouldn't see another sunrise. He'd been riding through the Sierra Nevada mountains for 3 days straight, heading back to his ranch after delivering a herd of cattle to Sacramento. The winter of 1883 had been brutal, and this particular January storm had caught everyone off guard. The temperature had dropped so fast that even the hardiest mountain men were scrambling for shelter. Cole had planned to make it to the trading post at the base of the mountains before nightfall, but his horse had thrown a shoe 2 hours back, slowing their progress to a crawl. When he first spotted the figure in the distance, he thought it might be a fallen branch or a pile of rocks. But something made him look closer, made him guide his limping mare through the knee-deep drifts to investigate. As he drew nearer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, her lips blue, her skin as pale as the snow surrounding her. She wore nothing but a thin cotton dress, now soaked through and frozen stiff in places. Her dark hair, matted with ice, spread around her head like a dark halo. Cole dismounted quickly, ignoring the protest in his stiff legs. He knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. For a terrifying moment he felt nothing. Then, faint as a whisper, he detected the slow, irregular beating of her heart. She was alive, but barely. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was rough from disuse and the cold. No response. He pulled off his glove and touched her forehead. She was burning up despite the freezing temperature around them. Fever. That explained why she was shaking so violently, even in unconsciousness. Her body racked with tremors that seemed to shake her very bones. Cole didn't waste time wondering how she'd ended up here, or why she was dressed so inadequately for the weather. Those questions could wait. Right now, getting her warm was the only thing that mattered. He shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her shivering form, then carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, too light, as if she hadn't eaten properly in days or weeks. His horse whinnied nervously as he approached with his burden. "Easy, girl," Cole murmured. "We've got to get her out of here." He knew he couldn't ride with the woman in his arms, not with his mare already struggling with the thrown shoe. He'd have to walk, carrying her, leading his horse behind him. The trading post was at least 8 miles away, maybe more. In this weather, with this terrain, it might as well have been 100. But there was a line shack about 4 miles south, built by shepherds who used the high pastures in summer. It wasn't much, just 4 walls and a roof, but it would have to do. Cole adjusted his grip on the woman, settling her weight more securely against his chest, and started walking. The wind howled around them like a living thing, trying to tear them apart. Snow whipped into Cole's face, stinging his eyes and making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. He kept his head down and pushed forward, 1 foot in front of the other, his arms aching from the weight of his burden. The woman continued to shake violently, her teeth chattering so hard he worried she might crack them. Every few minutes she would murmur something incoherent, lost in fever dreams. "Hold on," Cole told her, though he doubted she could hear him. "Just hold on a little longer." His own body was protesting now, the cold seeping through his wool shirt and vest without the protection of his coat. His fingers were going numb where they gripped the woman's body, and his face felt like it was being scraped with broken glass. But he didn't stop, couldn't stop. Whatever had brought this woman to the middle of nowhere in a blizzard, whoever she was, she deserved a chance to live. Time lost all meaning in the white hell of the storm. Cole walked until his legs burned, until every step felt like dragging himself through wet concrete. He walked until he started to wonder if he was going in circles, if the line shack even existed anymore, or if it had been swept away by some previous storm. The woman in his arms grew heavier with each passing minute, or maybe he was just growing weaker. Her shaking had lessened somewhat, which worried him more than comforted him. He knew that when the body stopped fighting the cold, death wasn't far behind. Just when Cole was beginning to think he'd have to stop and try to build some kind of shelter with his bare hands, he saw it, a dark shape emerging from the white curtain of snow. The line shack. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that his knees nearly buckled. He staggered the last 100 yards, his horse following faithfully behind, and shouldered the door open. The interior was dark and smelled of old wood and animal droppings, but it was blessedly free of wind and snow. Cole kicked the door shut behind him and carefully lowered the woman onto the dirt floor, keeping his coat wrapped around her. His hands were shaking now, too, from exhaustion and cold, but he forced them to work. There was a small stone fireplace in one corner, and thankfully, a stack of dry wood left behind by whoever had used the shack last. Cole's fingers fumbled with the matches in his vest pocket. It took 3 tries before he got one lit, and 2 more before he managed to coax a flame from the kindling. But finally, blessedly, fire bloomed in the fireplace. He added larger pieces of wood, building the flames higher and higher until warmth began to push back the deadly cold. Only then did he allow himself to really look at the woman he'd rescued. In the flickering firelight, he could see that she was young, probably in her early 20s. Her face, despite being gaunt and pale, held a delicate beauty. Dark lashes lay against her cheeks, and her lips, though still tinged with blue, were full and well-shaped. The fever made her skin glisten with sweat even as she continued to shiver. "We need to get you out of these wet clothes," Cole said aloud, though she showed no sign of hearing him. He hesitated, uncomfortable with the intimacy of undressing an unconscious woman, but he knew it was necessary. Leaving her in the frozen fabric would be as good as signing her death warrant. Moving quickly and efficiently, trying not to think too much about what he was doing, Cole removed the soaked dress. Underneath, she wore only a thin chemise, equally wet. That had to go too. He averted his eyes as much as possible, then wrapped her in his coat again and the saddle blanket from his horse, tucking both around her like a cocoon. He hung the wet garments near the fire to dry. The line shack was bare except for a rough wooden bench against one wall. Cole sat down heavily, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. Every muscle in his body ached and his hands and feet were still numb with cold. But the fire was warm and the woman was breathing more steadily now. That was something. He must have dozed off, because when he jerked awake, the fire had burned down to embers and the quality of light from the single small window suggested several hours had passed. Cole quickly added more wood to the fire, building it back up. Then he turned to check on his patient. She was still unconscious, but her color was better. The blue had faded from her lips, replaced by a healthier pink, though her cheeks were flushed with fever. He touched her forehead again and found it still burning hot. She needed water, medicine, things he didn't have. All he could do was keep her warm and wait. As the day wore on, Cole tended the fire and tried to make sense of what had happened. How had this woman ended up alone in the mountains in the middle of winter? She didn't look like a settler or a miner's wife. Her hands, when he examined them, were soft, uncalloused. The dress she'd been wearing, though simple, was made of good quality fabric, not the rough homespun most frontier women wore. Late in the afternoon, as Cole was trying to coax some melted snow water between her lips, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and she made a small sound of distress. "Easy," Cole said softly. "You're safe now. Just rest." Her eyes opened fully, revealing irises the color of warm honey. For a moment she just stared at him, confusion written across her face. Then her gaze darted around the shack, taking in the rough surroundings, the fire, her state of undress. Fear flashed across her features. "Please," Cole said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. I found you in the snow. You were freezing to death. I had to get you warm." She opened her mouth as if to speak, but what came out was a harsh, rattling cough. Her whole body convulsed with it, and Cole quickly supported her, helping her sit up slightly. When the coughing fit finally subsided, she sagged back against him, exhausted. "Don't try to talk," Cole said. "You've got a bad fever. Just rest." This time she obeyed, her eyes drifting shut again. But before she slipped back into unconsciousness, she whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. "Thank you." Those two words, barely audible, filled Cole with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Night fell, bringing with it even colder temperatures. The wind continued to howl outside and snow piled up against the door. Cole knew they were stuck here until the storm passed, which could be hours or days. He had some jerky in his saddlebag and the water from melted snow, but that was all. His horse, at least, was as comfortable as possible in the small shack, though she seemed nervous about the close quarters. Throughout the night, Cole dozed fitfully, waking frequently to tend the fire and check on the woman. Sometimes she was still, her breathing deep and even. Other times she thrashed and muttered, caught in fever dreams. Once she called out a name, Daniel, with such anguish that Cole's heart clenched. A husband, a brother, another loss in whatever tragedy had brought her to these mountains. By morning, the storm had lessened somewhat. The wind still blew, but the snow had tapered off to light flurries. Cole ventured outside long enough to tend to his horse properly, and to gather more wood from a small lean-to he'd spotted attached to the side of the shack. When he came back in, stamping snow from his boots, he found the woman awake again. This time her gaze was clearer, more focused. She watched him with wary intelligence as he crossed to the fire and added the new wood. "How are you feeling?" Cole asked, settling onto the floor a respectful distance from her. "Like I've been trampled by a horse," she said, her voice hoarse and scratchy. "But alive, which I suppose is better than the alternative." She paused, pulling the coat tighter around herself. "You saved my life. Found you in the snow," Cole said with a shrug, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Couldn't very well leave you there. Many men would have." She studied him with those remarkable honey-colored eyes. "I'm Amelia Ortiz, Cole Ramsey." He nodded at her. "You feel up to telling me what happened, how you ended up out there?" A shadow passed over Amelia's face, and for a moment Cole thought she might refuse to answer. Then she sighed, a sound full of weariness and grief. "I was traveling from Sacramento to Yosemite with my brother and his wife," she began. "We were supposed to be visiting my aunt and uncle who run a hotel there, but 3 days ago our wagon broke an axle on a bad patch of road. Daniel, my brother, said he'd ride ahead to the nearest town to get help. He told me and Sarah, his wife, to wait with the wagon." She paused, coughing, and Cole quickly brought her some water. After she'd drunk and caught her breath, she continued. "We waited for hours. It got colder and colder. Sarah was so worried about Daniel not coming back. Then that night we heard something outside. Sarah thought it might be Daniel, so she went to look." Amelia's voice broke. "It wasn't Daniel. It was a bear, a big grizzly, probably looking for food before winter really set in. It attacked her before I could do anything. The noise, the screaming, it was horrible." Cole felt his stomach turn. He'd seen what a grizzly could do to a person. It wasn't pretty. "I managed to scare it off with the rifle, but Sarah was already gone," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know what to do. I was so scared it would come back. and I kept wondering why Daniel hadn't returned. Had something happened to him too? I waited another day, but no one came. The food was running low and I was so cold. I knew I couldn't stay there. So I started walking, trying to follow the road, but then the storm hit and I got turned around. I don't even know how long I was out there before you found me. I'm sorry, Cole said inadequately. I'm sorry about your sister-in-law, and your brother. Well, maybe he's all right. Maybe he just got delayed or lost in the storm. Amelia nodded, but her expression suggested she didn't really believe it. Maybe. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Cole found himself studying her face, the way the firelight played across her features, highlighting the elegant curve of her cheekbone and the stubborn set of her jaw. Despite everything she'd been through, despite the fever that still flushed her cheeks and the exhaustion that lined her face, there was a strength in her that he found himself admiring. "We should try to get you to eat something," Cole said finally, reaching for his saddlebag. "I've only got jerky and it's tough as leather, but you need to keep your strength up." Amelia accepted the dried meat with a grateful nod. She gnawed on it slowly, her face contorting at the tough, salty taste, but she managed to get some of it down. Afterward, she seemed a bit stronger, more present. "How far are we from civilization?" she asked. "The trading post is about 8 miles north," Cole told her. "There's a town, Yosemite, about 15 miles west of that. But we're not going anywhere until this storm fully passes and you're strong enough to travel. Another day or two at least." "I'm strong enough now," Amelia protested, trying to sit up straighter, but the effort triggered another coughing fit, this one worse than the last. When it finally stopped, she was gasping and pale. "You were saying?" Cole raised an eyebrow. Despite her obvious distress, Amelia managed a weak laugh. "All right, perhaps I need a bit more rest." Over the next 2 days, a strange intimacy developed between them. Trapped in the small shack with nothing to do but talk and tend the fire, they learned about each other in a way that might have taken weeks or months under normal circumstances. Cole told Amelia about his ranch, a small spread in the foothills where he raised cattle and horses. He'd been working it alone since his father died 2 years back, slowly building it up into something respectable. Amelia, in turn, told him about her life in San Francisco, where she'd been living with her brother and his wife. Her parents had died in a cholera outbreak when she was 15, and Daniel had raised her himself, working as a clerk in a shipping office to support them both. When he'd married Sarah 3 years ago, Amelia had stayed with them, helping Sarah with the household and taking in sewing to contribute to expenses. "I was supposed to be getting a fresh start in Yosemite," Amelia said softly on their second night in the shack. "My aunt and uncle offered me a job helping run their hotel. Daniel thought it would be good for me, said I'd been cooped up in the city too long." Her voice cracked. "He was so excited about the trip, said it would be an adventure for all of us." Cole reached out without thinking and took her hand. It was still too warm with fever, but her grip was strong. "He sounds like he was a good man, a good brother." "He was the best," Amelia said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "And now he's probably dead because of that broken axle, because we took this trip, because I wanted a fresh start." "Hey, no," Cole said firmly, squeezing her hand. "Don't do that to yourself. You didn't cause any of this. Sometimes terrible things just happen and there's no reason for it, no one to blame. It's just bad luck and bad timing." Amelia looked at him with those honey eyes, and Cole felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not since Mary Beth Cunningham had married the banker's son 5 years ago, crushing the hopes of half the young men in the county, including him. "Thank you," Amelia whispered, "for saving me, for being kind, for listening." "It's nothing," Cole said, though they both knew it wasn't nothing at all. By the third morning, Amelia's fever had finally broken. She woke up weak and shaky but clear-headed, her skin no longer burning to the touch. The storm, too, had passed, leaving behind a world of pristine white and brilliant sunshine. "I think we can make it to the trading post today," Cole said, assessing both the weather and Amelia's condition, "if we take it slow." The problem, of course, was that Amelia's dress was still damp in places and wholly inadequate for the cold. Cole gave her his spare shirt to wear under the dress, and she kept his coat wrapped around her shoulders. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Getting Amelia onto the horse was an adventure. She was so weak that she could barely stand, let alone mount up. Finally, Cole lifted her onto the mare, then swung up behind her, settling her against his chest. It was far too intimate for propriety, but there was no help for it. Amelia was in no condition to ride alone, and he couldn't risk her falling. The journey to the trading post took most of the day. Cole's horse, still favoring her injured hoof, moved slowly through the deep snow. Amelia dozed against him, exhausted by the simple effort of staying upright. Cole found himself intensely aware of her presence, the weight of her in his arms, the way her hair smelled faintly of smoke from the fire. He told himself he was just being protective, that any decent man would feel the same way about someone he'd rescued. But he knew, deep down, that it was more than that. The trading post was run by a grizzled old mountain man named Silas Webb and his Miwok wife, who everyone called Little Bird. They took one look at Cole and his burden and sprang into action, firing questions at him while ushering them inside. "Found her in the mountains during the storm," Cole explained as Little Bird helped Amelia to a bed in the back room. "She'd been traveling with her brother and sister-in-law. Their wagon broke down, the sister-in-law was killed by a bear, and the brother went for help and never came back." Silas let out a low whistle. "Hell of a thing. You say the brother's name was Daniel Ortiz?" Cole looked at Amelia, who nodded weakly. "Daniel Ortiz," Silas repeated, scratching his beard. "Don't suppose he was a tall fellow, dark hair, about 30 years old?" Amelia's head snapped up. "Yes." "Do you know something?" Silas exchanged a glance with Little Bird. "Might be nothing, but there was a man matching that description came through here about 4 days ago. He was asking about wagon repair and looking for supplies. Said he needed to get back to his wife and sister right away. I sent him to the blacksmith in Yosemite, told him Tom Henderson could fix up just about anything. He rode out that evening, heading west." "That was him," Amelia said, gripping the blanket Little Bird had draped over her. "But if he left 4 days ago, he should have been back to the wagon that same night or the next morning at the latest. Something must have happened to him." "The storm hit that night," Silas said grimly. "Real bad, came up sudden like. If he got caught in it between here and where you folks were camped, well, he might have had to hole up somewhere until it passed. Or he could be lying frozen in a drift somewhere," Amelia said, her voice flat with despair. Cole knelt beside her bed. "Or he could be alive and looking for you right now. Don't give up hope yet." Little Bird, who had been preparing a tea of herbs and roots, brought a steaming cup to Amelia. "Drink," she said in her soft, accented English. "Make you strong. Tomorrow the men can search." That night, Cole slept on the floor of the trading post's main room, grateful for the warmth and shelter after days in the line shack. But sleep didn't come easily. He kept thinking about Amelia, about the way she'd felt in his arms, about the strength and courage it must have taken for her to survive what she'd been through. He'd known her for less than a week, but already he couldn't imagine not knowing her, not having her in his life. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Silas organized a search party, and Cole volunteered immediately. 3 other men from a nearby mining camp joined them, and they set out following the route, Daniel would have taken from the trading post back toward where the wagon had broken down. They searched all day, finding nothing but endless snow and the occasional animal track. Cole was beginning to lose hope when one of the miners, a young fellow named Jack, called out. He'd found something, a horse, dead, half buried in a snowdrift. Beside it, barely visible, was a dark shape that resolved itself into a man as they drew closer. Cole's heart sank. The man was lying face down in the snow, not moving. They all dismounted and hurried over. Silas reached him first and carefully turned him over. "He's alive," Silas shouted. "Barely, but he's breathing." It was indeed Daniel Ortiz, alive but in bad shape. His face was frostbitten, his lips blue, his breathing shallow and labored. They wrapped him in blankets and got him onto a horse, then raced back to the trading post as fast as the snow would allow. Amelia's reaction when they brought her brother in was everything Cole had expected and more. She cried out, half sobbing, half laughing, and tried to get out of bed to go to him. Little Bird gently restrained her while Silas and Cole settled Daniel onto another bed. "He's alive, Amelia," Cole said. "He's in rough shape, but he's alive." "Is he going to be all right?" Amelia asked, tears streaming down her face. "Don't know yet," Silas said honestly. "Got some bad frostbite and he's been out there a long time, but he's young and strong. He's got a chance." Over the next week, Daniel slowly recovered, though he lost 2 toes to frostbite. When he was finally conscious and coherent enough to talk, he told them what had happened. He'd gotten the wagon axle fixed in Yosemite and was heading back when the storm hit. His horse had panicked, thrown him, and run off into the night. He tried to find shelter but had gotten disoriented in the blinding snow. Eventually, exhausted and freezing, he'd simply lain down, too tired to go on. He'd expected to die. Amelia told him about Sarah's death, and Daniel wept bitterly. They mourned together, brother and sister, holding each other and sharing their grief. Cole gave them privacy, feeling like an intruder on such intimate sorrow. But as Daniel healed and regained his strength, he noticed the way his sister looked at the cowboy who had saved her life. And he noticed the way Cole looked back. One afternoon, while Amelia was helping Little Bird with some cooking, Daniel called Cole over to his bedside. "I want to thank you," Daniel said, his voice still weak but sincere, "for saving Amelia, for finding me. You didn't have to do any of it, but you did. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "No debt," Cole said, uncomfortable as always with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Daniel said. He studied Cole for a long moment. "You care about her, don't you, my sister?" Cole felt heat rise in his face. Well, she's a fine woman. Anyone can see that." A small smile played at the corners of Daniel's mouth despite his grief. "I think she cares about you too. I've seen the way she watches you when you're not looking, the way her whole face lights up when you come into the room." "It's probably just gratitude," Cole said, though his heart was pounding. "I pulled her out of a bad situation, that's all." "Maybe," Daniel said. "Or maybe it's more. Life's too short, Cole. My Sarah's death taught me that, if you care about someone, you should tell them. Tomorrow's not guaranteed." Cole thought about those words for the rest of the day. That evening, when Amelia came outside to watch the sunset, he joined her. They stood side by side in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Amelia said softly. "Very," Cole agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the sunset. She turned and caught him staring. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then, slowly, carefully, Cole reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Amelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this isn't the right time, and I know you've been through hell, but I need to tell you something." These past days, getting to know you, spending time with you, it's made me realize something. I care about you. More than I should, probably, considering we barely know each other. But I do. And I don't want to let you go without saying it. Amelia's eyes widened, and for a terrifying moment, Cole thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then she smiled, a real smile that transformed her whole face. I care about you too, she said. I kept thinking I shouldn't, that it was wrong to feel this way when Sarah just died and Daniel almost died and everything's such a mess. But I can't help it. When I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel like everything might actually be okay. Cole took her hand, marveling at how right it felt. So what do we do about it? I don't know, Amelia admitted. I'm supposed to go to Yosemite to work at my aunt and uncle's hotel. Daniel will need time to heal and figure out what to do now that Sarah's gone. Everything's uncertain. Yosemite's not that far from my ranch, Cole said. Maybe an hour's ride. I could visit. Court you properly the way you deserve. See where this goes. I'd like that, Amelia said softly. Then, rising up on her toes, she pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. I'd like that very much. Over the next few weeks, a plan took shape. Daniel, once he was strong enough to travel, would go to Yosemite with Amelia. He'd help run the hotel with their aunt and uncle, at least until he figured out his next move. Cole would return to his ranch to check on things and take care of his cattle, but he'd visit Yosemite regularly. The day came when they had to part ways. Cole had stayed at the trading post far longer than he'd intended, and his responsibilities were calling him home. He and Amelia stood outside in the crisp morning air, reluctant to say goodbye even temporarily. It's only for a week, Cole said, holding both her hands in his. I'll come see you as soon as I can. I know, Amelia said, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I just don't want you to go. I don't want to go either. Cole pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked under his chin. But I'll be back before you know it, I promise. You better be, Amelia said, her voice muffled against his chest. Because I'm not done with you yet, Cole Ramsey. Cole laughed and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Not done with you either, Amelia Ortiz. Not by a long shot. The ride back to his ranch was lonely. Cole had made the journey dozens of times, but it had never felt so long or so empty. His thoughts kept drifting back to Amelia, to the way she smiled, the way she laughed despite everything she'd been through, the fierce strength that burned inside her like a flame. When he finally reached his property, he found everything in decent shape considering he'd been gone for nearly 3 weeks. His neighbor, an old German farmer named Gunther Schmidt, had been checking on the place and feeding the stock. Cole spent the next few days catching up on chores, repairing fences, and generally putting things in order. But through it all, he was counting down the days until he could ride to Yosemite. When the time came, Cole made sure he was presentable. He bathed, shaved, put on his best shirt, and even dabbed on a bit of the cologne his mother had given him years ago and that he'd never had occasion to use. Then he saddled his horse and made the journey west. Yosemite in 1883 was a small but growing town, catering to the increasing number of tourists who came to see the spectacular valley and waterfalls. The hotel run by Amelia's aunt and uncle, the Mountain View Inn, was a 3-story wooden structure right in the heart of town. It was well maintained and inviting, with a wide front porch and flower boxes in the windows. Cole tied up his horse and climbed the steps, suddenly nervous. What if Amelia had changed her mind? What if, away from the intensity of their shared ordeal, she'd realized that what she felt was just gratitude after all? But when he walked through the door and Amelia looked up from where she was arranging flowers on the front desk, the way her face transformed with joy erased all his doubts. Cole! She rushed around the desk and into his arms, not caring who might be watching. You came. Said I would, didn't I? Cole held her tight, breathing in the clean scent of her hair. She smelled like soap and sunshine, no longer like smoke and snow. Come on. I want you to meet my aunt and uncle. Amelia took his hand and pulled him through to the back office, where a middle-aged couple was going over account books. Martha and Henry Owens were warm, welcoming people who immediately made Cole feel at ease. They'd heard all about him from Amelia and Daniel, and they insisted he stay for dinner. Over a meal of roast chicken and potatoes, Cole learned more about the family and their life in Yosemite. Martha was Daniel and Amelia's mother's sister, and she and Henry had moved west 15 years ago to open the hotel. Amelia's been a godsend already, Martha said, beaming at her niece. She's so good with the guests, and she's already reorganized our entire reservation system. I don't know how we managed before she got here. Amelia blushed at the praise. I'm just happy to help, and happy to be here despite everything. After dinner, Cole and Amelia took a walk through the town, enjoying the evening air. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. How's Daniel doing? Cole asked. Better, Amelia said. Some days are harder than others. He misses Sarah terribly. But he's starting to talk about the future, about maybe opening a business here in town. Uncle Henry thinks there's a need for a good general store. That sounds promising. Cole hesitated, then said, And how are you doing? Really? Amelia was quiet for a moment. I still have nightmares sometimes. About Sarah, about being in the snow, but they're getting less frequent. And having Daniel safe and being here with family, starting this new job, it helps. It all helps. She squeezed his hand. You help most of all. They stopped at the edge of town, where the road opened up to a stunning view of Yosemite Falls. The last light of day made the cascading water look like liquid gold. It's magnificent, Cole said, awed by the sight. It is, Amelia agreed. Then more quietly, but I think I could be happy anywhere as long as you were there. Cole turned to her, his heart full. Amelia, I know we haven't known each other long, but these past weeks without you have made me realize something. I don't want to spend any more time apart than we have to. I want to court you properly, take things at whatever pace feels right to you, but I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I'm looking for something permanent, something lasting. So am I, Amelia whispered. I never thought I'd find someone who understood me, who made me feel the way you do. But here you are, and I don't want to let that go. Cole cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet under the fading light. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, a kiss that tasted like new beginnings. Over the next 6 months, Cole became a regular presence in Yosemite. He rode in every week, sometimes twice a week when he could spare the time, to see Amelia. They went on long walks, had picnics by the river, and talked about everything and nothing. Cole met Amelia's friends in town, and Amelia visited his ranch, charming everyone she met with her quick wit and warm heart. Daniel, watching his sister fall deeper in love, gave his wholehearted approval. He'd grown fond of Cole himself, grateful beyond words for the man who had saved both their lives. When Cole asked Daniel for permission to propose, Daniel clasped his hand and said, You're exactly the kind of man I'd hoped my sister would find. You have my blessing, and more than that, my friendship. Cole proposed in October, on a crisp autumn day when the aspens had turned gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and falling leaves. He took Amelia back to the place where the road opened up to view Yosemite Falls, the spot where they'd had their first kiss. Amelia Ortiz, Cole said, getting down on one knee and pulling out the ring he'd bought in Sacramento, a simple gold band with a small diamond. You walked into my life in the middle of a blizzard, and you've been warming my heart ever since. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy?" Amelia was crying but smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed as the autumn wind swirled around them, carrying with it the promise of winter and the certainty of spring to follow. They were married in December, in a small ceremony at the Mountain View Inn. Martha had decorated the parlor with pine boughs and white ribbons, and the whole town seemed to turn out for the celebration. Daniel gave his sister away, his eyes suspiciously bright as he placed her hand in Cole's. The Methodist minister, Reverend Thompson, performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers. Amelia moved to Cole's ranch after the wedding, trading the bustle of the hotel for the quiet of ranch life. She took to it with the same determination and grace she brought to everything else. She learned to cook on a wood stove, to tend a garden, to help with the horses and cattle. Cole, in turn, taught her to ride like a true cowgirl, and they spent long days working side by side, building their life together. Their first year of marriage wasn't always easy. There were adjustments to make, compromises to find. Amelia sometimes missed the company of her family and the activity of the hotel. Cole sometimes struggled with expressing his feelings, retreating into stoic silence when things got difficult. But they worked through each challenge together, learning each other's rhythms and quirks, growing closer with each passing season. In the spring of 1885, Amelia announced that she was pregnant. Cole was overjoyed, though terrified at the prospect of becoming a father. He fussed over Amelia constantly, worried about her health and the babies. Amelia bore his hovering with amused patience, assuring him that women had been having babies since the dawn of time and she'd be just fine. Their son was born in November, a healthy, squalling infant with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Thomas Daniel Ramsey, after Cole's father and Amelia's brother. Daniel, who had indeed opened a successful general store in Yosemite and was courting a schoolteacher named Rebecca, was deeply touched by the honor. Cole held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overcome with wonder and love so intense it almost hurt. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He is," Amelia agreed, exhausted but glowing with happiness. "We made something pretty wonderful, didn't we?" "We did." Cole leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you, Amelia, for this, for everything, for choosing me. Always," Amelia said. "I'll always choose you." The years passed, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of a growing family. Thomas was followed by a daughter, Emma, 2 years later, and then another son, James, 3 years after that. The ranch prospered under Cole's careful management and Amelia's sharp business sense. They expanded the herd, bought more land, and hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work. On cold winter nights when the children were asleep and the fire crackled in the hearth, Cole and Amelia would sit together and remember that first meeting, when he'd found her shaking with fever in the snow and carried her miles to warmth and safety. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did," Amelia would say, snuggled against his side. "Don't," Cole would reply, tightening his arm around her. "You're here now, and that's all that matters." But Amelia would insist on finishing the thought. "I'd be dead, frozen in those mountains, and you'd be alone on this ranch, and our children would never have been born. One decision, one turn in the road, and everything would be different. But I did come along," Cole would remind her. And you're here and we have our family and our life together. That's not luck or chance, Amelia, that's destiny. You were meant to be mine and I was meant to find you. Destiny, Amelia would echo, smiling. I like that. Daniel remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting often with his wife Rebecca and, eventually, their own children. He walked with a slight limp from the toes he'd lost to frostbite, but otherwise, he'd recovered fully from his ordeal. He never remarried in the sense of replacing Sarah. He told Cole once, but Rebecca had brought light back into his life when he thought he'd be in darkness forever. Martha and Henry grew old running their hotel, eventually turning over more and more of the daily operations to a younger couple they'd hired. They doted on their great-nieces and great-nephews, always having candy in their pockets and stories about the old days. As the 19th century drew to a close and the 20th began, Cole and Amelia watched their children grow into capable, kind adults. Thomas took over more of the ranch operations, showing his father's skill with cattle and horses. Emma became a teacher in Yosemite, carrying on the tradition of educating the next generation. James, the adventurous one, talked about going to college in San Francisco to study law. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Cole took Amelia back to the line shack where he'd brought her that terrible night. It was still standing, though weathered and worn. They stood inside, remembering. I was so scared, Amelia said softly. Even in my fever, I knew I was dying. And then you were there and you wouldn't let me give up. How could I? Cole said. Even then, half frozen and delirious, you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Amelia laughed. Liar, I was a mess. You were beautiful, Cole insisted, and brave and strong you still are. They stood together in the little shack, two people no longer young but still deeply in love, and thanked whatever force of fate or fortune had brought them together. The years continued their relentless march. Cole's hair turned gray, then white. Amelia developed lines around her eyes and mouth, earned through years of smiling and squinting into the sun. Their children married and had children of their own, filling the ranch house with the chaos and joy of grandchildren. One evening in the summer of 1910, when they were both in their early 50s, Cole and Amelia sat on the porch swing watching the sunset. It was a ritual they'd maintained throughout their marriage, this quiet time together at the end of the day. You ever regret it? Cole asked suddenly. Staying here, I mean. You could have done anything, gone anywhere, but you chose this ranch and this life. Amelia looked at him with those honey-colored eyes that still made his heart skip a beat after nearly 30 years. Regret it. Cole, this life with you has been the greatest adventure I could have imagined. We've built something real here, something lasting. We've raised good children who are making their own way in the world. We've loved each other through joy and sorrow, sickness and health, just like we promised. She took his hand. If I could go back and choose again, knowing everything that would happen, I'd still choose you, every single time. Cole felt tears sting his eyes, something that seemed to happen more easily these days. I love you, Amelia Ramsey. I've loved you since I first saw you shaking in that snow, and I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Amelia whispered. My cowboy, my hero, my home. They rocked gently on the swing as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. From inside the house came the sound of their grandchildren laughing, and the smell of dinner cooking on the stove. Thomas and his wife Sarah, named after the aunt she'd never known, had brought the kids out for a visit, and the house was full of life and love. Cole thought back to that day in January 1883, when he'd been riding alone through the mountains, tired and cold and thinking of nothing but getting home. He'd had no idea that his life was about to change forever, that he was about to find the other half of his soul lying in the snow. If someone had told him then that he'd spend the next 3 decades building a life with a woman he hadn't even met yet, he probably would have laughed at the absurdity of it. But life, Cole had learned, was often absurd and miraculous in equal measure. It was full of tragedies that could break your heart and coincidences so unlikely they seemed like miracles. It was harsh and beautiful, brutal and kind, often all at once. And through it all, through every trial and triumph, he'd had Amelia by his side. She'd been his partner, his companion, his love. She'd made him laugh when he wanted to cry and held him when he needed strength. She'd given him children and a home and a purpose beyond mere survival. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia asked, noticing the contemplative look on his face. "About how lucky I am," Cole said simply. "About how one decision to check on what I thought was a pile of rocks in the snow led to everything good in my life." "It wasn't luck," Amelia said, echoing his words from years ago. "It was destiny. We were meant to find each other." "Destiny," Cole agreed. He pulled her closer, and they sat together as darkness fell and the stars came out, surrounded by the life they'd built together. Many more years passed, blessed years full of watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the family. The ranch continued to thrive, passing from Thomas to his son, keeping the Ramsey name alive on the land Cole had worked so hard to build up. Cole and Amelia grew old together, their steps slower but their love undiminished. They still took their evening seat on the porch when weather permitted, still held hands like newlyweds, still found joy in each other's company after more than 4 decades of marriage. When Cole died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Amelia grieved deeply, but without regret. They'd had a full life together, had loved well and been loved in return. She'd been with him at the end, holding his hand as his breathing slowed and finally stopped, whispering that she loved him and that she'd see him again someday. Amelia lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of that fateful day when Cole had found her in the snow. She told the story often, wanting them all to know how it had begun, wanting them to understand that love was worth fighting for, worth taking risks for. When her time came, Amelia went peacefully, a small smile on her face. Those who were with her at the end said that her last word was a name: Cole. They buried her beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a pair of oak trees they'd planted together on their 10th anniversary. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and the dates of their lives, and one more thing: together in life, together in eternity. And on winter nights, when the snow fell soft and quiet over the California mountains, the people of Yosemite would sometimes tell the story of Cole and Amelia, of a cowboy who found a dying woman in a blizzard and carried her miles to warmth and safety, and how that single act of courage and compassion had bloomed into a love story that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story about fate and choice, about kindness and courage, about the power of love to transform tragedy into triumph. It was a story that reminded people that the smallest actions could have the biggest consequences, that one person could make all the difference in another person's life. But most of all, it was a story about 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and chose, every single day, to keep finding each other, to keep choosing each other, until death, and even beyond. It was a love story for the ages, born in the harsh wilderness of the Sierra Nevada, nurtured on a modest cattle ranch, and lasting far longer than their mortal years. The Ramsey Ranch still stands today, passed down through the generations, a testament to what Cole and Amelia built together. And if you visit on a quiet evening, as the sun sets over the mountains and paints the sky in gold and rose, you might catch a glimpse of two figures sitting on the porch swing, holding hands and watching the world go by, together still and forever.